Well, good morning everyone and welcome to the Forthside Field Day. It really is a privilege to welcome you here this morning. It's a nice sunny and windy day and it's a great way that we can showcase what we're up to here at TAS Industry. And my name is Nigel Swarts, I'm the Horticulture Centre Leader, and it certainly is a privilege to be welcoming you here this morning. We do have some apologies from the Minister for Primary Industries, Jane Howlett. She's unable to make it this morning, unfortunately, but she does wish us all the best, and many of her staff have been out to Forthside over the last few weeks and really seen what we've been up to, and this is really an extension of what we can really showcase to industry as well. So. Today we are standing on the Lutruwita Aboriginal land, sea and waterways. I acknowledge with deep respect the traditional owners of this land, the Palawa and Pakana people upon which we meet today. We do pay respects to elders past and present as the knowledge holders and sharers of that knowledge. We honour their strong culture and knowledge is as vital to the self-determination, well-being and resilience of their communities. We stand for a future that does profoundly respect and acknowledge Aboriginal perspective, culture, language and history. Our theme for today is agriculture in a changing landscape, and the speakers for today are going to be reflecting on that theme as they talk about their research and their findings, and as we have conversations with a number of industry members as well. We're sharing some of our research and findings from our Cool Climate Hort Innovation funded research program and a number of new research initiatives funded by the state government. Today's event will feature an introduction of the Zero Net Emissions Demonstration Farm, which will be hosted here at Forthside, as well as research updates relating to the Cool Climate Horticulture program, ending with a Q&A with growers from local industry, led by Alex Russell from the TAS Farm Innovation Hub. And then we'll have a lunch, followed by a farm walk, inviting you to explore the various aspects of our research here at the farm. Now, I just want to invite Professor Dugald Close to step in for Mike Rose, who unfortunately has COVID this morning. Dugald's going to come and say a few words on behalf of the Director. Welcome, Dugald.
Thank you, Nigel. Well, good morning, everybody. It's lovely to see everyone here on this slightly windy but lovely sunny day. Always sunshine up here on the northwest coast. I'm going to do my best to represent Mike. As you've heard, he's an apology. Very disappointed to come down with COVID. He always loves this field day, loves to get out and about. So he's very sad and holed up at home as we speak. Now, we're very aware of some of the great advantages we have in Tasmania for our vibrant horticulture industry, our climate, our soils, our access to water. Maybe sometimes we take for granted the fantastic knowledge that we have in the community, the farming community, the ability of our farmers and the way they deliver on new and some not so new crops year in, year out. We benefit from relative isolation from pests and disease, have quite a biosecure place to farm. We have relatively good access to large export markets and great policy support from government. Of course, we're all very aware of climate variability and climate change. Talking about the weather has taken on a new meaning in the last decade or so. Resource availability can be a major issue, and COVID has really put a spotlight on that, of course. We need to think very hard about efficiencies, and right now in the media we're seeing discussion around the sea freight over the strait. Labour availability continues to be a challenge for us, as well as the cost of labour. So these are everyday realities that require a lot of innovation to ensure that we're economically feasible and competitive. Field days like this one provide us a fantastic opportunity to come together and to share knowledge. TAS is very proud to host the event. We have a commitment to making our research as accessible as possible to those people that can use that knowledge, can take our findings, integrate it into systems and really work one-on-one with agronomists and farmers to continue to improve Tasmanian agriculture. A really strong foundation to Tasmanian agriculture is the successful ag science degree that is now taught out of Launceston as well as Hobart. That's a message for all of us to take to the whole community. There's been a lot of confusion about that, so if we can all take that on to spread the word, we're teaching ag science in Launceston as well as Hobart. And of course, teaching it out of Launceston hopefully brings the opportunity to a broader reach of our community. The cost of living we're all aware of. It's very at the forefront of the younger generation at the moment, and everything we can do to help can matter. Blow the trumpet just for a second. So there's a Good Universities Guide, which is a national guide for students that help them in their decision making about which universities they enrol in. It is entirely based on student evaluations, so unsolicited and not attributed to individuals. It's all unbiased data. And our degree was voted the best in Australia in 2024, based on student experience, teaching quality, and this is of course driven by the dedication of our teaching staff and the support staff around the teaching program. So well done to our teaching program. Back to Forthside. So our vegetable research facility is a key part of TIA. It's a place where we can do research that we can't necessarily do on commercial farms. It may not be that close to commercial reality. It does allow us to take risks, does allow us to set up long-term trials. It has a whole heap of advantages that we're very lucky to enjoy. It's certainly a hub for exploring the future of agriculture, and that's what today's about as well, sharing what we're up to. It's the home of the Tasmanian Seed Potato Certification Scheme, and I know that Doug and the team put in a lot of effort to ensure that that certification scheme runs smoothly and effectively for our Tasmanian growers. They certainly get on the road, and they can be fantastic for transiting stuff down the highway because they're down the Huon from up here and all over the place. So throughout today, you'll hear from our researchers and PhD students on a whole range of topics. For better or worse, you're going to hear from me about Chinese medicinal herbs, we're going to hear from others about managing diseases, improving soil health, leveraging ag tech, optimising irrigation for added value. We hope that there's something here today for everybody. In addition to research updates, we're going to have a Q&A session. So this will be where we have local growers discussing challenges and opportunities, and I'm sure that'll be really insightful and an interesting session. Some good news. Yesterday, the government and the university announced that each will be chipping in $500,000 towards a new glasshouse facility for the North West Coast. Oh, yes, let's have a round of applause. Hooray! It's great to celebrate, isn't it? And that, we're hoping, can be leveraged. So obviously, I think as I said on the radio this morning, we're all sniffing an election, so we're going to be trying hard to push those funds to leverage for a really significant facility. In the interim, the team have done a fantastic job of setting up some interim facilities just out here. They're looking new and flash. They're just to get us through. So looking ahead, we're really pleased to announce that Forthside is set to become Australia's first zero net emissions horticulture demonstration farm. This is a potentially transformative initiative. It's supported by the Tasmanian Government through the Ag Innovation Fund, and it will position Forthside as a real-world example of sustainable farming at scale. We hope to showcase commercially practical and validated solutions for achieving zero-emission farming. We consider this a bold step, and we're proud to embark on this ambitious target. I hope we can all leave here today inspired, informed, connected to new opportunities, ideas and people. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope very much you can enjoy the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dukes, for stepping in for Mike. So this commences our first session this morning. We'll have 3 speakers before morning tea, and there'll be an opportunity to ask each speaker some questions at the end of their presentations. And then we'll come back after morning tea and hear from 3 more speakers before we have the Q&A session, and then we'll have lunch, and then we'll head out for a farm walk. So can I welcome Tory Clarke, Dr. Tory Clarke, to the stage to come and talk to us about this zero net emissions demonstration farm here at Forthside. Tory's going to be leading the research, and really looking forward to hearing what she has to say about that. Welcome, Tory.
So my name's Tory Clarke. I'm a research fellow based up here in Burnie, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities for horticulture in Tasmania, particularly in respect to emissions and a net zero future. So the challenge here is around reducing our emissions. And you might have heard people talking about, net zero by 2050. And so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time first talking about what that actually means. Like, what is net zero? And what this is about is it's the emissions that are generated from different processes going into the atmosphere, which we know are contributing to climate change and other secondary effects. But it's also about our ability to sequester and capture some of that carbon. So you've sort of got two levers here. You've got emissions going up and the ability to push things down into the soil. And agriculture has a role in this. So in Australia, agriculture is contributing about 14% of the emissions that we're generating. And a lot of this, the majority, is from livestock production, but horticulture is also a significant contributor of these emissions. And that's primarily generated through our use of fertiliser inputs into the system, which can generate greenhouse gases like nitrous oxide and carbon dioxide. And this is important to understand and address and try and reduce these emissions because they're having quite significant impacts. And some projections have shown that horticulture and cropping are actually at much higher risk of profit losses due to these changes from emissions and climate change. So we're not as well insulated perhaps as some of the other industries. And so it's really important that as a society we address these issues and the opportunity to move towards that net zero future where we're not generating a net emissions. And it's also important because there's increasing demand from consumers that they want to have sustainable products that they purchase. And it's also about market access. We want to be able to sell to different markets where this is prioritised and valued. So we really need to be able to demonstrate that we can farm sustainably and address some of these challenges. So to address this challenge, as Dugald mentioned, I'm really happy to announce a new project that will be starting up next year, which is the Zero Net Emissions Horticulture Demonstration Farm, which is going to be hosted here at Forthside. And so, as Dugald said, this is funded by the Tasmanian Government's Agricultural Innovation Fund. And our aim here with the demonstration farm is really to demonstrate practical solutions that are commercially ready for growers. So we want to try and do this at scale as a way to get industry and growers coming in and seeing how some of these new technologies and solutions that can both reduce emissions and increase our carbon sequestration can be done at a farm scale. So what we're hoping to achieve with the demonstration farm is this example of how this can be done. And it's not just about reducing emissions, we also want to make sure that we can demonstrate that this can be economically viable. So it's about capturing information about the emissions that are generated from different farming processes and also about that return on investment and cost of doing these. So how much inputs cost and what do you get out of it? And can we actually make this a profitable, sustainable way to farm? And so this really complex image here is just to try and show you that there's a lot of parts in farming that contribute to emissions. But as I mentioned, it's really that synthetic fertiliser addition that's driving a lot of the emissions in horticulture. So I guess our sort of key aims that we're looking at is the nitrous oxide emissions, so looking at opportunities to reduce that. And a lot of that comes from nitrification of ammonia, urea applied to the soil. And we're also looking as well at the potential to increase the carbon sequestration. So can we actually trap more carbon into the soil, into the plants that we're growing and the microbes in the soil to truly offset that carbon? But a really key outcome from the project that we want to achieve is to have validated tools for growers. So finding ways that we can estimate what our emissions are and have that validated with real-world data. And develop tools so that at your farm you can know what emissions you're producing and what the changes you might do, what impact they're going to have. And also getting that return on investment through that. So how much are you actually spending to do this and is it worthwhile? Is it practical and sustainable? So how will the demonstration farm work? Broadly, we're going to be comparing different farm management strategies. So we're going to start with the industry standard. So for example, potato, 150 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare added onto the field. And then we'll be looking at a reduce, so halving that, and then also having a no synthetic NPK input. But against cake day. Oh my goodness. Sorry. Right, I think the cake is after my talk, so you'll have to wait. Yeah, so against each of those, we're also going to be trialling and comparing the addition of some alternative inputs. Because obviously, if you take nitrogen out of the system, how are you going to have a product at the end? You know, we're producing crops full of protein, we need nitrogen inputs, but it doesn't have to be from synthetic N. So we'll be looking at a range of different alternative inputs that we can trial in the farm. And our goal here is to look at things that are commercially available and ready to roll out. So things that are actually practical that can be used. And I had a logo on an earlier slide, sorry, I need to put it on this one, but there's a new initiative Australia-wide that's the Zero Net Emissions for Agriculture Cooperative Research Centre. So this is a really big group of industry and research and governments that's all coming together with the goal of accelerating our transition towards net zero. And TIA, the University of Tasmania, is a research partner in this CRC. And what that means is it gives us the opportunity to tap into some of these new developments and technologies and products that are being developed to address these issues. Okay, so these alternative inputs are really at the heart of what we're trying to do here. And this list that I've got up here, it's really just kind of a broad suggestion of some of the things we might be looking at. A key aspect of this project is really about collaborative design on it. So we're not going to dictate what's going to be used. We want to have industry and grower input so that we can actually test things that people want to see if they work and that are going to be practical and useful on their farms. But I thought I'd just touch off a couple of the different alternative input strategies that we're looking at. So there's things like biological soil amendments that actually inhibit that nitrification. So they stop that breakdown of fertiliser into nitrous oxide. There's also a new range of fertilisers being developed that are what we call net zero fertilisers. So these are fertilisers that don't have that emissions footprint and they're built in with things like those nitrification inhibitors. And then there's also really practical things that can be incorporated as part of a farming system. So the precision agriculture, the number of passes you do across the crop, how you're applying your fertilisers and your water so that you can get maximum use efficiency of them. Reduce tillage, so you're not turning over that soil and letting more emissions come out of it. And even the crop rotations that we use in this system. So the farm demonstration project is going to be over a 4-year cycle, so we're going to try and do a crop rotation through this. We're going to end with potato as our cash crop in a cool climate system, but there's opportunity there through the 4 years to look at alternative crop rotations and what impact that might have both on emissions and on the profitability. And so to really ensure that we get a long-term output of this, we've got these kind of 4 pillars that we've built this project around. So as I mentioned, a big part of it is this co-design and collaborative approach to it. So when the project kicks off July next year, it's really going to start with sort of some workshops where we're getting industry and growers together and looking at what are practical solutions that we can use. What are our priorities? What are we really looking at testing here so that it can be useful for our growers? And then throughout the project, we're going to be collecting a lot of data about how the different treatments impact. So this will be emissions data. So we've got tools like the QUAL, the eNose developed by TIA, which can actually measure the actual emissions coming out of the soil. So things like nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide production. But we're also going to be working with economists to do those return of investment analyses because, we can't just think about farm gate value at the end of this. We've got to think about the input costs going in. And, there's actually potential savings to be made there. If you're not buying in synthetic fertiliser, that's really expensive. You might be able to have cheaper input, so you don't need as much out the other side to still generate the same profit. And then in years 3 of the project, we want to move beyond the demonstration farm into some grower-led trial sites. And so this is a co-design research approach that's been used really successfully in other TIA projects. We're actually taking what we're learning from the demonstration farm and equipping growers with the skills to actually trial it and evidence if it's effective on their own farms. And so with that, you'll have the support of TIA experts to design a trial on your own farm and see how it might actually work for you. And we'll provide the tools so that you can measure and estimate and calculate if it's actually, working. And then obviously we want to have a legacy from this project. And so I've mentioned a couple of times about tools. So these are things, there are some tools already available, and with the collaboration that we have with the CRC, this is really an opportunity to help put our data into those tools, but then also bring the tools and have them available for growers here. So how can you estimate your emissions? How can you calculate what you might produce? And so that's a really important part of the project, that there'll be resources available from it. So I'm just going to finish there. As I said, we'll be kicking off the project mid-next year, And so if you are interested in learning a bit more about it or potentially being involved in some of these conversations that we're hoping to have, please come and have a chat with me. Jason, Scott and Nigel are also on the project with us as well. And so, yeah, we're really looking forward to where this demonstration farm can take us, and hopefully a lot more opportunity to have people come out to the farm and learn together around how we can make our horticultural industry more sustainable. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that we've got on our list of ideas to look at. There's going to be a talk actually later today about the reuse of some sea urchin waste for exactly this, so using this as an amendment for soil and increasing productivity. So there's definitely opportunities there, and I know there's been some research around fish farm waste, so that's a really high nitrogen waste product that needs to be recycled or used, and so there's opportunities there to look at that as well. I guess for us, we're really trying to keep what we're doing relevant and ready to go. So while we will have some sort of discovery, fundamental, new idea research in there, we also want to make sure that the demonstration farm trials things that a grower can access straight away. So it's kind of balancing that.
Okay. Hello, Mike Badcock. Tory, is it proposed you might have a legume crop in some part of your potato trial as a way of naturally putting nitrogen into the soil?
Yeah, so I think I had up on the slide there around biological nitrogen fixation. So legume crops like beans, peas, they have this ability to pull nitrogen out of the air and actually they don't need the fertiliser. And so absolutely that's part of it. So often in a crop rotation you might have a pasture, and that might be a ryegrass dominated one, but there's opportunity there to perhaps increase more clover or a legume like that, metacargo in it, and then push that nitrogen back in there. So yeah, absolutely, that's going to be a big part of it.
One more question?
Thanks, Tory. I thought CO2 was the big problem, not nitrous oxide. Is there any scope for CO2 kind of capture or anything like that in this research?
Yeah, well, so I've kind of focused on nitrous oxide because that's about 80% of the horticultural emissions, and it's really from the fertiliser release. CO2 is also released a little bit from the soil, but there's also a lot of CO2 release from your farm equipment, right, your diesel motors, things like that. So we're, I guess, more focusing on the biological side of it, and so looking really at the fertiliser as our key target because I think that'll have the most impact. But getting increased carbon back into the soil is going to be a big part of it. So we're looking at in the crop rotations, are there different plants that we can put in that we know are really good at building that carbon profile in the soil to pull that out. And so that's kind of those two levers I was talking about, that you've got emissions that you can reduce, but you can also push more carbon into the soil, and that'll help address that CO2 balance as well.
Oh, please join me in thanking Tory for her wonderful presentation. And if you do have any more questions for Tory, please come and see her in the break as well. I'd like to welcome Dr. James Hills to the stage now to come and present on the new irrigation project that's recently been funded by the state government also. Welcome, James, who stepped in very much at the last minute as well for another sick person in our team.
It's a delight to be here. As Nigel was saying, a last-minute step in for Marcus, who's unfortunately sick today. But I just want to talk a little bit about this new irrigation program funded by the state government around growing value from irrigation for Tasmanian agriculture. So a little bit of background to this particular investment around irrigation and irrigation expansion. Obviously, there is a real ambition to grow Tasmanian farm gate value to 10 billion by 2050, and most of the capability of that is really through the irrigation expansion that has occurred. And the investment that's been made over a period of time in all these irrigation programs, we're quite familiar with a lot of them, there's about $700 million, both public and private investment in this infrastructure. And when we look at the application of water onto our agricultural areas, the majority of that now is applied through centre pivot irrigation. And so we need to understand something about what that investment has achieved to date and what we believe is that investment is capable of achieving into the future. And so part of the focus of this work will be around particularly centre pivots, because that's a big part of the way in which we irrigate in our horticulture and our pastoral industries. So this particular program, it's 3 years as a program of work that's funded through to June 2027. It's $1.6 million worth. Nigel is leading this project along with Caroline and myself, helping to assist with that. And there are a number of partners and stakeholders in this particular program: Tasmanian Irrigation, TAS Water, NRM North, NRM Cradle Coast and TAS Farmers are some of the key stakeholders, along with the state government, in this particular project. There's two main themes that we're looking at within this project. So the first of the themes is very much around the economic value derived from this investment in irrigation infrastructure. So what we want to do is, we've had so much money put into the schemes, we want to be able to get an understanding of what the value of that is and what the potential value is going forward. And so we have Dan and Steve, who are from, well, Steve's now with us, Tia, but from the College of Business and Economics, and so they're going to be overseeing the first of those themes around the economic value. And then the second theme is very much around minimising the impact and maximising the return through effective, efficient irrigation. So with our irrigation practices, we want to make sure that we're getting very effective use of our water, but also minimising the impact of any potential side effects through the application of water and the runoff and so forth within our soils and our systems. And David Page and Marcus Hardy are leading that particular theme. So if we think of the way in which this project is set up, the project governance, so as I indicated, the project is led by Nigel, assisted by myself and Caroline Mohammed, and we have underneath that a project management team. So Stephen Ives with Theme 1 and the economic side of it, and Marcus Hardy leading Theme 2 around effective irrigation. And then we have demonstration farms and irrigation focus groups where we're going to be doing a lot of our work led by Stephen and Marcus. Sitting beside this here is the advisory group, and that advisory group is set up and involves a whole heap of interested stakeholders in irrigation. So we've got the TAS Farm Innovation Hub, who's there helping us with regard to our engagement with industry. We've got opinion advisory involved in irrigation, TAS Irrigation, TAS Water, NRM North and South, Hydro TAS, TAPG, TAS Farmers, NRE, and AgLogic is an example of those who are part of the advisory group that are going to be providing advice back to us as part of the leadership of this particular program. So it's a fairly comprehensive program, and it is involving in making sure that we're interacting with all of those key people who are involved in water within the state. So just thinking a little bit about Theme 1, the macro to micro scale assessment of the derived value from irrigation to Tasmanian agriculture. The state government are really interested in what we're seeing with regard to that investment. So there has been significant growth in irrigation infrastructure with this investment in our schemes and in our irrigation. And that significant investment, we're wanting to ask the question, what impact is that having? So we want to be able to go out there and collect some data in relation to that, do some benchmarking, do some economic analysis, both at the macro and the micro level, so on farm and within the system as a whole, to be able to help us to understand what we have achieved and to guide future investments in those practices. So that's really Theme 1. And so some of the activities associated with this theme, so we're going to be doing farm surveys, interviews, collecting economic data to analyse the irrigation's impact on production and profitability. There will be some case studies across diverse regions and crops to highlight some of the barriers and enablers to our use of irrigation water and the investments. There's going to be some farm level modelling on some scenarios and some cost benefit analysis in assessing those irrigation schemes, and then we'll be creating some business insights for growers on best strategic practice for maximising those financial benefits, and providing evidence-based recommendations for policy on irrigation expansion. So that's really in capturing the I suppose the activities associated with this first theme of this project. With Theme 2, it's looking at minimising impact and maximising return through effective and efficient irrigation. And there's a number of research questions that we're looking at in relation to that. What is the current effectiveness and efficiency of our overhead irrigation systems in particular? And what opportunities exist to improve those? And we'll we'll highlight just in a minute some of the things that we already understand and some of the things that we can then work on in terms of achieving more effective and efficient irrigation. How can irrigation systems and practices be made more effective and resilient to drought? So with the climate change and the issues that we face in relation to that, what can we do with regard to the efficient use of our irrigation within those scenarios? And how can growers get more water into their soils with each irrigation? That's a particularly important one, because it's okay to be able to get water to the place where we want it and to start applying it, but does it actually get into the soil and have the impact that it needs to have? And that's one of the key issues that we face with regard to irrigation systems. And so just having a quick look at some of that, when we look at the use of irrigation water applied to a lot of our crops and our pastures, there is generally low irrigation effectiveness. And this is just one example of this at play. So what you can see here is a soil moisture graph measuring soil moisture at 10 centimetres, 20 centimetres and 30 centimetres. Coming out of the winter into early spring, we've got fairly high soil moisture. Then you'll see that at each of those levels, 10, 20 and 30 centimetres, it drops off as the season goes on. So the amount of moisture within the soil is being taken out. And that is irrespective of the fact that we're irrigating, so the bars down the bottom, the irrigation and the rainfall events are occurring. So what we're seeing is that we're not necessarily getting that water into the soil and changing that soil profile to be able to achieve the effective irrigation. And so we've got to ask the question, why is this occurring? What is it that we need to understand, and what can we do about it? Another example is what we've termed the green drought. I've done quite a bit of work in the pasture side of things over many years, and we did some surveys in the dairy industry looking at irrigation use on pasture, and we came across this issue that is really associated either with poor irrigation practice or with a system that is not designed to be able to meet the demand that's required within the irrigation of pastures. And so if you look at this graph here, this is what you call a water budget. So for those who are not familiar with it, I'll just quickly explain it. So we've got a soil moisture deficit, and where we've got the green area that's shaded, at the top of that area we've got field capacity. That's where we want to get our moisture to, so that's the top end of soil moisture. At the bottom end of that green area is our refill point, and we want to make sure that our soil moisture, the deficit that we occur as a result of drawing the moisture out, which is that orange line there, stays within the green area. Now, if you look at this scenario, so this is an actual scenario that occurred on pastures. What we've got here is we've got soil moisture that starts out right at the top of field capacity. The soil is nice and moist. As we look at time running on, we can see that the soil moisture is draining out from say, November here. And once we get down to a certain deficit, we then start irrigating and then rainfall. But what you'll notice is with those irrigation and rainfall events, the soil moisture is not getting up into that green zone where we need it to be able to productively grow our crops or our pastures. The reason for that is in relation to, in this case, a delay in the start of irrigation at the beginning of the season. So soil moisture dropped really low. And as a result of that, when we started the irrigation process, we weren't able to lift that soil moisture while there was no rain back up high enough to be able to get productive pasture growth. So it started about 83 kilos of dry matter. While we were irrigating, it dropped down to 43 kilos of dry matter. It was only when, at the end of that period, we got the soil moisture back up into that green zone, it increased again, or started to increase in terms of our pasture production. So what are we doing? We're irrigating, we're feeling good about it, it actually looks green, but we're not getting production. And so you can see that we call that the green drought. It looks okay, but it's actually not achieving what it needs to achieve. And that is due to, number one, poor irrigation practice, not starting up early enough to hold it there. But secondly, pivots cannot apply enough irrigation in a 24-hour period to bring that soil moisture up into the green zone. I'm not saying pivots in general. In this particular case, we weren't able to increase the soil moisture. Why? Because the capacity of that irrigator was such that the amount of moisture that was going out in a 24-hour period was not able to be replaced in 24 hours. So the only way you could get it up was to have a rainfall event to correct it. And so you've got to think about what it is you're installing that meets the need of the crop and the circumstance that you're actually irrigating to. So some systems are not resilient. If you fall behind, you can't catch up. So that's just an example of what we need to try and understand, and what we need to understand in terms of the issue in all of our cropping systems. The final example here is really around the pivot itself and the problem of pivots. The bigger the pivot, the greater the number of spans, the bigger the issue when we get further out on our span. So obviously, when we look at a pivot, it's moving quite slowly in the centre as it runs around, or it's moving very, very quickly on the outer spans. And to be able to get an even amount of application of irrigation, so a depth of irrigation, we need to have a lot more water being applied on those outer spans than the inner spans. And so if you look at the instantaneous application rate, on the inner spans it's around 15 millimetres per hour, you get right to the outer spans 160 millimetres per hour. That's how much is being applied to be able to get the same amount of application in terms of depth. The problem with our soils is that we have an infiltration rate of somewhere between 30 and 60 millimetres per hour. Once you go beyond that, you have a lot of issues with runoff, and that has a whole heap of other implications with the movement of soil and all sorts of things. So we're not actually getting the water that we're applying into the soil to achieve the efficient and the effective irrigation. So no, a rule of thumb, runoff tends to be a problem when pivots are over 400 metres long is perhaps the issue there. So we need to think about our infrastructure, we need to think about our soils, we need to think about our infiltration rate, and we need to think about how we can effectively get that soil moisture into the soil. So benchmarking irrigation effectiveness and efficiency, there's also some work going on, or going to be going on in there, both at the landscape scale, where we're going to be looking at the soil types, the slopes, better understanding the locations and so forth in relation to that. So we've got some historical soil moisture data we're going to mine as well in terms of what we already know. AgLogic have got a whole heap of that there because of what they're already monitoring, so we're going to be able to use that. And then at the pivot scale, we'll be monitoring single irrigation events, looking at application uniformity, soil moisture storage, infiltration rates, runoff and so forth. So that's some of the focus that we've got for some of the work going forward. And I think that's probably enough as a taster.
Yeah, so last couple of weeks, without any scientific evidence, there's probably been $30 million worth of crops washed out with the rain we had a couple of weeks ago. Those farmers would have some of the best irrigation systems already in place, remote technology, soil moisture monitoring. And in your research questions, I really think that it's time that drainage is part of the farm gate value agenda. Whether or not it's because maybe drainage doesn't provide the best photo opportunity than big shiny excavators and pipes above the ground. But, you know, we can have the best stuff on top of the ground, but, you know, along the northwest coast and the north, there's been some of the best drained ground, naturally draining ground affected by a lot of rainfall. And, you know, I think drainage should be part of the remit in this because, yeah, it's all very well to put it on, but it's a big investment that can be lost in a couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marcus is our soil scientist, and he will definitely be, and he always talks about drainage. It probably wasn't listed specifically there, but we'll be, obviously as part of the advisory group and talking to a lot of our stakeholders, we'll be looking at what are some of those key things we know. So we've just put up some ideas of the things we're going to look at. Drainage is really important. I know in relation to any system that's set up, one of the first things you want to ask is what is the drainage like in relation to that. You can't just use technology like variable rate to fix some of those problems. You really want to go in and deal with your drainage first. So yes, it will be a key part of this.
Thanks very much, James. You can really see your passion for irrigation coming through there and your wealth of experience as well. So I really appreciate you stepping in there at the last moment. Can I invite Professor Dugald Close to the stage to come and talk to us about the traditional Chinese herbs, that the research that's going on at the farm here.
Thanks, Nige. So I guess this is a slightly the black sheep of the presentations in that it's about potential new crops that we don't know a lot about. So can't guarantee that we can answer your questions at the end, but we can try. This photo up on the screen is just down the road a little bit. This is Marlene herbs. They've been growing Astragalus or Mongolian milk vetch for some years for extract product. So that's about as commercial as it gets at the moment. Oh, I should just add, so we are the traditional Chinese herbs research hub. It's not medicine. It is a medicine. It's used for health, but we're actually focused on the herbs and the production of the herbs. There's plenty of scientific evidence looking at the effectiveness of the bioactives in those herbs, but we don't address that issue at all. We're very much focused on the productivity, pre and post harvest, and the quality in terms of the bioactives. So just a little intro on herbs in their totality. So you can see here in 2022, In terms of US dollars, it's estimated at being worth $216 billion. And Business Research Insights are estimating that that's going to almost double in the 10 years to come. So there's great potential for expansion in what's already a very large industry. This photo at the top, I took on a study trip to Nanjing, which is in the sort of on the eastern seaboard and in the home city of the University of Chinese Medicine, the Nanjing University of Chinese Medicine. This is just a public hospital, and you can kind of see the we're getting a tour through. You see the at the front there, the queue is metres deep, and these distributors are just working flat out to get these traditional health products put together for the clients as they come through the door. So yeah, general applications healthcare, I guess we think of it more as preventative healthcare. That's how they kind of use it over there, but very much in the same hospital they've got Eastern medicine and Western medicine. So it's seen as complementary, not replacing. I guess consistent with other products too, we're on the doorstep of countries where this has been a 1,000-year-old tradition, and where a lot of the expansion is likely to happen. In saying that, we're seeing domestic expansion as well, particularly on the mainland, obviously, but they will probably tend to be even more traditional and hold on to importing their stuff out of China, Korea, Japan. So we work with our industry partner, Australian Education Management Group, and WME Health. They're a Melbourne-based Australian company. They're mainly focused on educational offerings, but they have a very deep philosophical belief in traditional Chinese medicine, hence the investment. Roger Lee is sort of second from left there in the centre. He's the CEO of the company. And this is just demonstrating a bit of a get-together with state government in particular. The Office of the Coordinator General, John Perry, is there, with university and various Chinese university representatives as well. So the overarching question for the Research Hub was, can Tasmania become a supplier of high-quality herbs as well as products? So we're actively researching about seven crops at last count, and we are very focused in terms of field trials here at Forthside in what Doug affectionately calls the nursery block, because we're pretty much just gardening around the corner here in terms of proof of concept. Because before you go past go, you've got to work out whether the bioactives are going to be up to scratch in terms of what the marketplace expects and actually requires. So the Chinese have a thing called a pharmacopoeia, the Europeans do as well as the Americans, and that's a great big set of specifications. So it sets minimum standards, and below that it cannot be used as a health product. So we had to demonstrate that our soils, climate, management practices would be able to deliver on that front. This bottom photo was one I took in China not so long ago. So this is our colleague, Professor Wu. So he's a senior researcher in the Nanjing University of Chinese Medicine. So we've come into this as just naive puppies, essentially, whereas their whole university is focused on traditional herbs, and they've got a tradition of growing these crops and using these products over thousands of years. So, of course, we have tried to learn as best we can, but there's only so much you can take away. So this is just the team, including Professor Wu and Dr. Alita Isles, who's up the back. Hello, Alita. We've got a bunch of PhD students who have been doing fantastic work, both in China and here in Tasmania. So Shilin and Mr. Jiang are both based in Nanjing University of Chinese Medicine, but have spent significant study periods here. It's really valuable because they can access the Chinese journals that obviously we can't. So it's really informed all our research, which has been fantastic. Okay, and also they've been able to explore the marketplaces. So go to places where these herbs are bought and sold, look at the reality of that trading, and also go to the growing regions. So they've done study tours where they've gone to the growing regions and come back with information that in some cases has certainly informed us. In other cases it hasn't. So we're talking generally not large-scale production and generally high amounts of labour, with, of course, a low cost of labour in China. So a lot of their production practices aren't necessarily transferable here, and hence the work we're doing at Forthside. So just a little bit on what's new this season. So we've got a bit of a scale-up pilot trial of Astragalus membranicus mongolicus. So that's why we're calling it milk veg, because it's a bit of a mouthful. It's a bonus that it's a legume. It's from Mongolia, so it's pretty tough. Doesn't need much water except very early on. What we're after is a nice long taproot called the whip pole on your far right there. It's a typical legume. You can see the flower. It's very typical. The foliage as well. And we're aiming for it to be a 2-season crop. So in China, sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it's 3 years. But for obvious economic reasons, we're aiming to have adequate yield of bioactives in a 2-year window. This is a plant that we've grown here at Forthside with Hui's PhD, just to demonstrate the plant. So specifically to the milk veg, it's currently a $5.45 billion crop globally, and similar to the herbs more generally, it's set to almost double in the coming 10 years. The key drivers are the health benefits, so it's very much seen as a preventative health inclusion in many prescriptions by pharmacists and doctors. And it's increasingly being adopted and adapted as an ingredient, as an extract for different products. And in fact, our collaborator might end up going down that route. We're not quite sure what the final product's going to look like at this stage. We rolled up to Shanghai late last year to kind of show the product, and so we actually Alita worked very hard to organise just about every little bit of Astragalus we could pull together out of our stores to package up and send over to Shanghai. So there's a major import expo over there in Shanghai every year, and we had a small booth kind of demonstrating what we were sort of hoping to deliver potentially to the market down the track. There was certainly a fair bit of interest. I guess it was I went for a bit of a walk and just about managed to get lost. It's about a 50-hectare site. And there's lots of health supplements. There's lots of pills and tablets and powders and things like that, but not much that's sort of close to what we're offering here, particularly if we go with either whole or cut product. We had a fair bit of interest, and you can see there we are talking about the product and the offering. But otherwise we were surrounded by a whole heap of beef, a fair bit of seafood and a smattering of wine, so it wasn't a bad place to be. So this season we've got 3 research blocks going or being set aside for Astragalus. What the hub's been able to demonstrate through the sort of proof of concept research we've done in the nursery block here is that we can produce product of the required quality in terms of bioactive components, as well as the shape of the whole product if marketing of the whole product is what's desired by our industry partner. So that's all positive, but then there's a whole heap of question marks, obviously, and that's can we economically and feasibly produce this crop. So there's a whole heap of questions there listed. How best to go around soil preparation, weed, pest and disease management. Do we use seed drilling or do we use transplants? And Hills Transplants have been fantastic to work with this season on getting this crop ready. They did a bit of early trial work comparing to how it came along compared to broccoli, and then delivered in full and on time with a brand new product. So hats off to them. They were great to work with. Different densities in terms of weed management, irrigation and nutrition. What do we do there? We've been holding back on nutrition throughout the whole life of the hub actually, because generally you don't want to be growing vegetable. You want to be growing bioactive. Harvest approach we're not really sure about because we were just literally digging holes out here, and we can't really do that at scale obviously. How are we going to dry this product? How are we going to slice and dice it? What are the margins involved? So a whole heap of really critical questions that we're hoping to answer over the next couple of years through the research work done here at Forthside. That's all I have on the Astragalus. Thanks for your attention.
All right, let's get started, shall we? And I'm assuming the other guys will slowly make their way in over the next 5 minutes or so. But so one of the big programs that we have running at TIA at the moment is the Growing Value for Cool Climate Horticulture. And that's a collaborative project and funded by Hort Innovation through the Hort Frontiers program. And it's got co-funded by TIA and UTAS and a number of industry partners as well. And in the program, we have a whole bunch of research staff and we have 10 PhD students too. And last year we heard a little bit about those PhD projects, and straight after this field day, we have a 2-day forum where we're talking about the research that's happening in that Cool Climate program. And that research expands from vegetables right through to cherries and berries and veggie seeds as well. And we have Peter Targett, who's one of our PhD students working on the program, and Peter's been looking at collaroding peas for some time now, and many of you will know Peter because he has got that sort of reputation among industry and he's well known among industry. And so we welcome Peter to the stage to come and tell us about his PhD project in peas. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks, Nigel. Yeah, g'day everyone. I'm Peter Targett, and I'm currently studying a research project in Colorado of peas. So, 2022 was a particularly poor year for peas in Tasmania. It was a high rainfall year, and that's thought to put extra disease pressure on the peas and also leading to those poorer outcomes. So you can see here from the graph how much average yields reduced. They were reduced by about 22% overall. And what does that mean? For Simplot's entire program, that means a $3.4 million loss at the farm gate for that year. And the far northwest coast was particularly hard hit. And the average yield reduction equates to $290,000 across 8 growers. Now, the other outcome from this poor year was that one of the large supermarkets has decided to mitigate their risk by diversifying their pea supply chain overseas. And that's reduced Tasmania's pea contract by about 1/3 this year. So if we want to help with this problem, we first need to understand, and quite often that means boots on the ground. So in 2022, I also did a crop survey that year, and I randomly sampled plants across 20 paddocks, and I monitored for disease. If we zoom in on that hard-hit area of the far northwest coast, an interesting development occurs. So all of these crops have a similar soil type. They all experienced very similar weather conditions, and they're all planted with the same variety of seed. In the blue, they're all planted the same day. In the green, they're planted only 10 days later. And yet, the yields between these closely related paddocks are very highly variable. And that suggests that it's not just the weather that's at play here. So if we look at some of the better performing crops that year, they had final results like that. And if we look at some of the poorer performing crops, their potting phase looked like that. Absolute disaster. And I sampled all of these crops at an early growth stage as well as this late growth stage. And at the early growth stage, they looked pretty good if you drove by from the gate and looked in from the gate. But when we pulled up those plants, we're just starting to see disease in that collar area, as well as a little bit of foliage disease. And the question then is that important for these outcomes? Let's find out. So here's a graph, and on the left axis you can see yield, and on the bottom axis you can see foliage disease. And as the foliage disease increases, the yield absolutely plummets. And there was actually a really high correlation between foliage disease at early and late sample times and your yield. which is significant because if you're a grower and you can predict yield at that time, at that early time when the crop appears to look good, then you can actually make management decisions at that point as well to try and stop that disease cycle from snowballing. Also looked at that collar rot region, that lower part of the plant, and that also had really highly correlated results. The more collar rot we saw at that point, the worse the yield outcome was as well at both sampling times. So that was good. Now in the drier Midlands regions, we actually got very low foliage disease. So we didn't see any correlations there. That was okay. And we also got really high collar rot girdling scores, but these weren't correlated with yield. So the yield variabilities there is mainly due to other factors, but it's still very significant to note how much disease was there. And pretty well every plant was, by the end of the crop, had collar rot coming in. The other big and also surprising outcome of this research was in the causal organisms. So for the last 30 plus years, our primary focus has been around Ascochyta, which affects the colour of the peas, and then it produces above ground spores and then cycles in the foliar. But what I found was in the collar region at the early growth stage, Fusarium was just as much of an issue. And Ascochyta and Fusarium were absolutely everywhere across all growing regions. The Fusarium that I got, I've tested several of these isolates now, and they seem to be highly pathogenic. And you can see from that photo, in this case, the Fusarium's actually affecting the plant a lot more than the Ascochyta. And the symptoms of disease in that collar area actually quite similar to Ascochyta. And I think that that's a big contributor to why we've overlooked Fusarium as an industry in the past, because they both present very similar. So moving forward with Fusarium, one of the biggest species, most significant species worldwide is Fusarium oxysporum. And there are actually 4 different races. All 4 races are present on the mainland, but we don't know what the prevalence of those races is here in our growing regions. So what I want to do next is actually race type my Fusarium oxysporum and see their prevalence. And that'll be significant because some of our major commercial varieties that we grow are actually susceptible to some of those races. And then we can use that information to then go to the breeders and say, hey, can you give us varieties that will be resistant to what we have in this region? So the other thing we're doing is trying to change the course and focus. Let me explain. This document here is the Strategic Agrochemical Review Process document, and it's updated every 4 years by HIA. And so they interview growers, they do surveys, they find out what our high priority diseases are. And on that document currently, only Ascochyta is listed as a high priority disease. But from my research, I think there's strong evidence to move Fusarium up from moderate to high. And doing so will actually unlock a lot of government support systems for us. It creates a better case with HIA when we ask for research funding for that disease type. CropLife uses the high priority disease issues to then make best management practice guides for growers. And it also, the high priority issues get taken to the AgVet Chemical Forum, and where our problems are communicated directly to all of the chemical companies. and to see if they have anything in their arsenal that they can partner with government and us to get permits to fix the problems. So finally, I'd like to say a big thanks to everyone who's contributed in some way, as well as my financial partners for investing in me to achieve these outcomes for industry. So thank you.
How long has the fusarium been around? Do you know that?
I think the first recorded mention of fusarium is like 1960 or something for Tasmania, but it hasn't really popped up in the literature much after that.
Okay. So presumably if you're looking for resistance, you have to get resistance to Ascochyta and fusarium now.
Yep. And I should clarify, there are multiple species of fusarium that can cause issues. But yeah, Fusarium oxysporum's like one of the biggest worldwide. Yeah.
And does this fusarium cause problems elsewhere in this crop, or?
That's a really good question. Traditionally, they've named it Fusarium oxysporum, and then they say Forma specialis peas. But that kind of, and the idea behind that is, oh yeah, that's a fusarium that affects peas. But that sort of idea is starting to change. And yeah, I'm sure that there are plenty of other types of crops and legumes, etc., that would affect. Even with Ascochyta, that affects a lot of native species as well. It just doesn't present as those severe disease symptoms.
Yeah, it works now.
Yeah.
So moving forward, is there anything you'd specifically like from the farmers or our representative bodies? I know you're going to the chemical companies to see what they got in their artillery, but where to from here in terms of boots on the ground and support back to what you're doing?
That's a really good question. The hardest hit point of the pea plant was the seed area. And in a lot of cases, especially in the Midlands, the peas are only this far up the ground, and you're picking up like plants that are fully girdled, full collarot. And when I was a kid, I ring-barked my dad's roses by accident with a whippersnipper. And that had a significant, that just killed them basically. And so for peas that are that high, getting hit that hard in that seed area, I actually think that some sort of chemical treatment that maybe if it's systemic, it might go up into that collar region. I'm not sure, but I think that would be a good shot. And so just trials in that, using that sort of direction, I think that's the future step.
G'day, Pete.
G'day.
That fusarium species, is there anything in the rotate? Like, will it host on other plants? Is there anything in the rotation we can do to reduce numbers?
I haven't specifically gone into the detail of researching that particular area, so I can take a note and get back to you on that one. Yeah.
Sweet, cheers.
I tested a lot of different seed batches, and I didn't find pathogens on the seed itself. So it's in the soil. And one thing I will say, it goes back to Tom's question. I took some of those soils, I stored them for 1.5 to 2 years, and I then did bioassays on those soils where you just plant the plants, mix a little bit of soil into the potting mix, and I got every single pot where I added soil was infected with disease. And I know for a fact that some of that's fusarium. So even if you dry a soil, leave it on, and don't, you're still getting that fusarium to persist in that soil.
All right. Thanks,
Cool.
Peter.
Thank you.
So my name's Nigel Swarts. I'm presenting on behalf of Harriet on sea urchin fertiliser. So for those of you that might have been diving on the eastern part of Tasmania, what you might have seen is this. And this is sea urchins which have really taken over and created barrens on the sea floor. And they've eaten the kelp beds, and they essentially eat themselves out of house and home as well. So what are we going to do about that? How are we going to manage that? And whose responsibility is it? And so the state government have created a scheme where they're incentivising harvesters, so fishermen, to go and actually harvest the sea urchin waste and turn it into an industry. And so we've got contract fishermen who harvest the waste and send the whole sea urchin to Margate, actually, and the True South Seafood take the roe out of the sea urchin and have turned that into an industry, into a business. And so that roe gets packaged off overnight, and the very next day it's in the supermarkets in Japan or Hong Kong. And it is a wealthy product, and it's a very expensive product. And for those of you that have tried it, it looks like a tongue. It's got a sort of a texture like a tongue, but it tastes like a bit like an oyster. But it does have a lasting flavour in your palate that lasts for hours upon hours upon hours. And for some people, they love it. I'm not convinced about it whatsoever, but it is highly valuable. However, it's not valuable enough for the state government to not create a subsidy for the harvesters to keep harvesting it and to solve the problem. And so what we need to be looking at is how do we actually turn this seafood, industry to something that could be profitable for industry. And so, when you harvest sea urchin, 90% of the product is waste. And so there's a whole stack of shell and there's a whole stack of gut waste that can't be sold, and we've got to do something about it. And generally what happens is that just gets taken to landfill or gets put on a paddock and just gets left to rot there. But what we've discovered is that the transport costs to get the sea urchin products to the waste location is highly expensive, and industry spends hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to make that happen, which makes the whole industry unviable. So what are we going to do about that? We want to try and see if there's a way of creating a circular economy from that. See if we can turn that shell waste into a fertiliser or a liming product that could actually be saleable to the local public or to growers. And so we've started a number of projects, and there was significant investment by a company, and they brought in a machine that was able to crush and dry the sea urchin waste and turn it into a powder. And so we've been experimenting with that powder for a number of years now to see what kind of value it has as a fertiliser or a soil ameliorant. And so this presentation is sort of a 2 to 3 years worth of work that Harriet's been completing on behalf of industry and behalf of the state government to address that. And so we're at the stage now where we're doing field trials in apple crops and wine grape crops as well. And now we're just about to, I'll show you some results from what we did on potatoes. So research projects, FRDC, Fisheries Research Development Corporation, funded an initial trial, also supported by the Abalone Industry Reinvestment Fund, and that's a state government fund. And we looked at processing the sea urchin waste and how to actually do that. And then the product trials. We did a bunch of pot trials on tomatoes and also sunflowers, and we've published those trials now, and now we're at the stage of field trials. Then the MB, so the Marine Bioproduct CRC, come on board, and together with NRET and TIA, we've funded an additional 24 months of work to look at on-farm experimental sites. Then a whole bunch of soil physical analysis and microbial analysis as well. So what have we learnt so far? Well, ground-dried sea urchin waste, SUW, is very high in calcium. It's a key has key micronutrients, and this is where it distinguishes itself from lime, because it does have boron, and we do know that many Tasmanian soils are boron deficient. It also is it's got iron in it as well. So it does work as an effective liming product. However, it is low on NP and K. So we haven't been able to, fertiliser effects are observed in pot trials, but not in field trials. But we certainly are well aware that it does lack NP and K. Appropriate guidelines are required for it to be developed as a product, because of its salt content. And that's always something that's going to be an issue when it comes to anything that comes out of the ocean. But for the fishery, the economic analysis has found that processing sewage and waste was more profitable than just simply disposing the waste onto a paddock. So we're at the stage of doing field trials. We've got a trial up here in the northwest at Forthside. Harriet set up a number of trials on wine grape vineyards, and also at an organic apple orchard down south at R&R Smith. So the vineyard trial, Harriet set up a trial in a Chardonnay block and a Sauv Blanc block. She looked at control of no sea urchin waste, and a lime replacement, so Oscal with 97% N percentage at 5 tonne a hectare, coarse sea urchin waste at 20 tonne a hectare, and fine sea urchin waste at 10 tonne a hectare. And the coarseness of the sea urchin waste was, that's delivered by the machine that grinds it all up and powderises it, and based on how long it actually gets cooked for. And so she did this at the Two Bud Spur Vineyard down at Gardeners Bay, which is right down in southern Tas. And the results suggested that for both varieties, soil pH was persistently increased by sea urchin waste application. And that wasn't surprising, right? I mean, we do know that it acts as a liming product. But certainly, regardless of coarseness, the greater the volume that was applied, the higher the pH ended up being. But we did find that whilst we saw no consistent impacts on leaf or soil nutrients, we did see soil sulphur, boron, sodium chloride and EC observed. So there is a bit of a limit there to what we can apply, and it is based on the initial soil type as well and the initial pH of the soil type. We certainly didn't see at this stage differences in yield parameters, juice, grape composition yet. So that brings us to Forthside, where Harriet set up a potato trial where she looked at a control of no sea urchin waste, 4 tonne a hectare, 8 tonne a hectare, and then a 12 tonne a hectare of sea urchin waste. And we're also setting this up at a site that at Forthside that is quite low. It has quite a low pH to begin with. Planted in December 22 and then harvested in May 23, and she did a whole bunch of measurements there. So what did she find? She certainly found that soil pH increased at harvest, and that increase was generally matched by a trend in increasing amount of sea urchin waste. Soil calcium, magnesium, sulphur, sodium and EC increased as well, but no differences in yield parameters yet. I think because of this site, there's room to move in how much we apply. And so I think Harriet could definitely be applying more, and the application rate may be too low for it to be, I guess, identified as a fertiliser, but certainly could be identified as a soil ameliorant, coupled with another form of, nitrogen or phosphorus to make up what's missing from the sea urchin waste. And this is something that no doubt we'll be talking to Tory about with the minimum inputs work too. So this season plant nutrient analysis will also be undertaken. So next steps, Harriet's going to continue monitoring these field trials. Doug has been planting potatoes already for this season, and that new block has already started growing. We'll see. I mean, Harriet, when she wrote this presentation, I think it was a few days before the big rain event, she thought it was going to be a dry year. I'm not sure if she can still claim that, but I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens this year. And I mean, leaching of that sea urchin waste is an issue, and whether it will be, I guess, demonstrated as a fertiliser is yet to be seen. But she is going to invest quite heavily in soil physico-chemical attributes, which she's going to be looking at data and looking at sort of degraded soils and whether sea urchin waste has a positive influence on soil water infiltration rate. She will also be looking at microbial analysis for long-term field sites, and then, of course, that washing of sea urchin waste salt content and whether it's practical or not from a soil ameliorant perspective. So I think the idea that circular economy is growing is something that we want to be really looking at TIA, and this is just one aspect of combining, I guess, the marine part of the world with what we're doing in agriculture. And there's a growing momentum in that. And Clarissa's question before was fabulous, and I think that's certainly something that we're going to see more of in the future at TIA. And I'm really excited to see how these results from Harriet are going to really shape what we actually apply to the soil in the future in ag landscapes. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them, but certainly I can point you towards Harriet as well, who's got a lot more to say on the topic. Any questions on that so far? Yep, over the Frank.
Nigel. Apples can be prone to calcium and boron issues. Did you see any improvement by using that product?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and that's actually why we did apply this product in apple orchard. When I'm trying to think of the data that Harry presented. So she did this 2 years ago for an honours trial, and she integrated sea urchin waste in a number of other soil amendment treatments. She, from memory, and I'd have to check this completely, but there was no difference in fruit nutrition associated with the trials compared to other soil amendments. But what we have seen, in new blocks, is that adding the sea urchin waste in conjunction with compost adds a weed suppressant effect. And so we're able to see better development, and the younger trees got up and going quicker because of the soil ameliorant, and the fact that the compost and the sea urchin waste ended up being a weed suppressant. And so there was benefits in that. But we haven't actually seen the impact yet on apple nutrition.
How much of the dried sea urchin waste is there available?
Yes,
in Tasmania?
I was waiting for that question, and that is a really important question. And that is, from an economic perspective, that is a really important question. So the way it works at the moment is there's about 350,000 tonnes of sea urchins that are harvested every year, right? So it's a lot, and that is actually really significant. And if 90% of that is actually waste, and then there's 60 to 70% of that which actually gets used and dried and powdered, so we can actually achieve a significant volume to be used. However, when I speak to a grower, they say, give me all of it. Absolutely, give me all of it. So how are we going to be able to distribute that around? And also moving that waste from one place to another ends up incurring a whole bunch of transport costs as well. I think one of the issues with that also is the cost to develop the powder is significant. The machine takes 24 to 48 hours, and you can only put so much through it at a time to be able to demonstrate, to be able to develop the coarseness that we're looking for. And what we have shown is that we don't have to get it down to a really fine coarseness, because it seems to achieve what we want it to achieve. And the coarser it is, sort of means it holds onto its nutrients for longer, and that's kind of what we were looking for anyway. However, the time taken to develop that is really costly. The question at the back there?
All right. Well, the urchins are a really obnoxious marine pest, and they're causing devastation on the east coast. So when you talk about that current tonnage, are we actually dropping numbers over time, or are their numbers still increasing? That question isn't so much how much today, but how much for the next.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a good question. So the question is, where is the balance then? Are we harvesting enough to make sure that we're keeping the sea urchin population under control, or are we actually harvesting too much so that that fishery doesn't even exist in the next 3 to 4 years? And I guess where we want to be getting to is that fishery doesn't exist in the next 3 to 4 years. So obviously that's the long term goal, but they are so effective at reproducing, these sea urchins. But what happens is, as they eat themselves out of house and home, the barrens get further out. And so it's much more difficult to entice fishermen to actually go and harvest, because all the low-hanging fruit, to say, is gone. All the easy-to-harvest stuff is already gone. So the growers, the fishermen have to go further out to get the volumes that they need to make it, sustainable and cost-effective for them as well. So it is an interesting conundrum, I think. I think will be interesting to see what happens over the next few years. But, where we are working towards is eradication of the sea urchin. That's obviously the end goal.
So there are other companies in Tasmania that produce wastes that are high in certain other nutrients.
Yeah.
And I can think of one that produces a waste that's high in potassium. And you kind of wonder what the potential is to combine some of these waste streams into a product that actually has more of a balanced kind of mix of nutrition that might be okay.
Oh, absolutely, Les. And I think you're speaking to, so the Marine Bioproduct CRC is looking at delivering exactly that. And so we're working with Ocean to Earth and Pentark at the moment, who are combining the mortalities from the fish farms together with wood waste products into something that's actually going to be really cost effective and sustainable from a nutrient application, soil ameliorant. And we're actually going to be doing those trials down the track at Forthside as well. So that's a project that's ongoing and developing at the moment. All right, I'm going to leave it there and hand over to Hannah Lewis now. Welcome to Hannah Lewis from the TAS Farm Innovation Hub, who's going to be talking to us about irrigation tools. Welcome, Hannah.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning. My name's Hannah Lewis. I'm the project manager with the Tasmanian Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub. The TAS Hub is part of a national network of 8 hubs established by the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund, and we're working collectively to build resilience to climate variability and drought, enabling agriculture to remain productive, sustainable and viable amid the complexities of our current and future food production and environmental systems. Events like today are an important reminder of the transformational power when we have research come together with industry and farmers, and that through collaboration we can address challenges, create opportunities unique to our regions, and shape the future of farming in practical ways. And this is really where the Hub has its role and to play as a facilitator, enabler and a supporter. So today I'm going to speak briefly about some of the projects, on-ground collaborative projects that the Hub has run and is running. And there's a few tools in there that may be useful for our farmers in the room and for industry and advisors for your clients as well. And so the focus of today, I'm going to talk about our water use efficiency project. This is being run currently by Pinion Advisory and in collaboration with AgLogic, and Jason Lynch is here at the back from Pinion and can answer technical questions, as is Marek from AgLogic. So the aim of this project is for Tasmanian producers to build their confidence and skills in their on-farm water management, and so that they are supported to improve their resilience to drought. The project commenced in April of this year and will run through to December of next year. This project was the culmination of statewide stakeholder feedback, and the activities have been designed following extensive farmer input, and that's been the key to the design of this project. It's been farmer-centric, the farmer's been at the centre of it, and so I say, as we go through today, if there is anything that you feel like should be delivered that isn't yet in the plan, please come and have a conversation, because this project is intended to be useful. Going to flag that all of the resources that have been created thus far and that will continue throughout the life of the project are available and will be available on the TAS Farm Hub's website. And the project commenced with centre pivot performance activities, and as we heard from Nigel earlier, this is critical for Tasmania because 95% of the new water applied is by centre pivot. And we heard a lot from our farmers, part of the focus group, that their pivots aren't actually operating as well as they could be, and there are huge efficiency gains to be made in really simple things like getting our pivots calibrated. So the team at Pinion have put together some really useful checklists and basic pre-season preventative maintenance, really. And so they ran a couple of workshops in Campbelltown, and we had some really good feedback from that. There is an opportunity to rerun those in next spring or winter. So again, if you feel like that would be useful for farmers in your region, let us know. Those fact sheets are available online. Stock water, the design of this project was that it was intended to be statewide and for rain-fed as well as irrigated systems. Stock water came through in the consultation as something really critical. This photo is from King Island earlier in the year. They obviously had a huge dry there, and then fortunately had some rain, but as we heard earlier, drainage, very, very important there. The importance for stock water obviously being that if we can get good reticulated systems, and I know a lot of our growers here, they will have some run country as well as their cropping and be using livestock. If we can get, as part of their whole farm management, if we can have good reticulated systems, we can use our run country better, and we can also make sure the water is in the right place in our landscape. So part of this Pinion put together have built a really handy Excel calculator. It's available for downloading. We'll take you through peak daily water demand calculation based on all of your different livestock classes. There is a little calculator there to help with understanding the investment that might be required for that, and also some really helpful worked examples in calculating pressure and friction loss, which again on King Island we heard was a bit of a whoopsie. A lot of people had invested quite heavily in their pipe, but had opted for 1 inch poly, so not much coming out of the end of that. We have some really great resources on farm dam construction and water licensing. So we heard through the consultation that navigating dam construction was particularly challenging, and then also navigating the licensing applications through NRE. So there's been some really handy resources put together to help with just who to speak to and when to speak to them and in what order. We know that better built dams in the right place on our farms can help maximise runoff capture, limit evaporation and other losses, and improve water quality, which will make us more resilient in dry years. So there's a case study available, which kind of runs you through a hypothetical from dam construction through to all your permits, and then there's also a really handy quick guide, which, as I said, points you to all the right pages on the NRE website. There are a few of those printed over in the trade hall, so very happy to, that one's actually really, really useful. The other project that I'm just going to flag that's coming up in 2025 is one that we're running with Landcare Tasmania. It is on farm dam enhancement. All of the research is indicating that better water quality in our dams correlates to better livestock weight gains. It also can help reduce evaporation if we enhance our dams with native vegetation and limit our stock access, we can have limit evaporation and actually retain more water in dry years. So Landcare's project will set up 3 demonstration sites, south, north, northwest, and they're running Train the Trainer workshops from February, and therefore all of our advisors and NRM professionals. So please contact myself or the Landcare Tas team if you'd like to be part of that. Should say that the Hub funded programs are free for participation. So optimising irrigation scheduling, very important, as we heard this morning as well. Again, we were really surprised throughout all of the feedback and all of the conversations that we had with growers that we really need to go back to basics, just understand our soil-water relationships and get a better understanding of when to turn the water on. AgLogic will be delivering a whole range of content on when to apply water and how to optimise scheduling under the Water Use Efficiency Project. The first of which is a webinar happening on Friday. Marek's going to be taking everyone through a little bit of a seasonal update, statewide snapshot, talking through the current soil moisture data as they see it, and particularly how to best utilise the rain that we've just had and when to start irrigating again. That webinar is going to be followed up by one in late summer, early autumn and late autumn, and there's a little QR code there if you'd like to attend. That one on Friday will be recorded and will be made available on the website. On that and on AgLogic, another hub-funded project has been Tools for Drought Management project run by AgLogic, and that established a statewide network of soil moisture probes and weather stations. That project leveraged funding also from AgriFutures, Wine TAS, Cradle Coast NRM, and a number of private landholders to make available this network of weather stations and soil moisture. So huge data set. The project has now finished, but this is commercially available, and you can head to the AgLogic website and subscribe to get access to some or all of these weather stations. This data, in the conversations we've had as this project has come to a close, we have heard from growers how much this has improved their ability to make on decisions day to day, to improve their irrigation scheduling, to improve how effective our spray contractors are, make better decisions around when to harvest, etc. And I thought what James this morning was saying about the green drought was quite interesting, and we heard that loud and clear when we had a grower from Epping Forest chatting to us, and he was saying so one of the stations is hosted on his property, and he was very, very pragmatic. He said, I'm a bit of a tight ass, I never would have bought it. But now that I've got it, I would not farm without it. And he said, most important thing is I know now when the match is fixed. I know when I can't catch up with my soil moisture, and I know whether or not I just simply shouldn't put the spuds in the ground. So for us, we see that as a big win, because that's practice change. That is making a decision that's good environmentally and good economically. So that's a win in my book. Thank you. Please get in touch if hopefully some of that is useful. And the Hub has a much broader string of projects and lots of practical tools that we are hoping to that will help you and in how you go about your day-to-day work, and make sure that we are resilient moving forward. Thank you. Thanks, Nigel.
Closely enough, that AgLogic weather station network publicly available?
Anyone can subscribe. There is a fee to subscribe now. Whilst the project was on, so there's been 2 years of publicly available data set, and as of July, when that grant finished, it switched to subscription. It's very affordable, and if Marek's here, he'll be able to tell you the exact price. But they're also got they've structured it so if you've got a team, James, you can have multiple users, and that it is also getting plugged into a number of other tools, and some of that, like your farming forecaster, that is publicly available. So same data, different access point.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Nigel.
And I do want to welcome Alex Russell from the TAS Farm Innovation Hub, and also some industry members. I want to welcome James Burberry from Sumich, and also Terence Rattray from Yum Potatoes to the stage. And Alex is going to lead a discussion with Terence and James from an industry perspective, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what they've got to say. So welcome to both of you, and also thanks to Alex for leading the discussion this morning.
Hello everyone, my name's Alex Russell. I'm an Extension Officer with the TAS Farm Innovation Hub that you heard a little bit about from Hannah just now, and I'm joined by Terence Rattray from Yum, Tasmania, and James Burberry from Sumich. I might start with you, Terence, to tell us a little bit about your farming operation and what drives you to farm the way that you do.
We started accidentally growing spuds down in the northeast of Tasmania in 1994. We bought a rundown beef block just as a lifestyle block, but there was 100 odd acres of usable land there. So we ploughed it up and ended up putting in just for pasture improvements to make it look good. Someone around a barbecue said we should grow some organic potatoes because it had never been conventionally farmed, and was certainly clean from that aspect, and that there was customers waiting down in Hobart for the product, so we made contact with them and planted a couple of acres of spuds. In 1994, things sort of snowballed, probably roughly doubled every year, and almost still has, probably back to about 50% increase in the last 12 months, to about 7,000 tonnes.
That'll keep you busy enough, I can imagine.
Yeah, we've bought Perfecta Produce onions in the meantime as well a few years ago, and when we're packing onions, we're up to about 50 plus employees, so it's a worthwhile business.
And so the spuds and onions, you've remained focused on that because that's something you love doing, or is there the market and you're good at it? I suppose it's a range of reasons, but is that a purposeful choice to keep growing those things and not explore any other opportunities?
We have, in the early days when we started, was only organic. I must say too that we're only organic, certified organic is probably only about 1% or less than 1% of what we do now. The market, we just rolled with the punches, and the market was for a conventional product, not so much for an organic product. I remember we went up to Sydney markets trying to expand our footprint, and the conventional wholesalers up there said, "Oh wow, don't put organic on the box and we'll sell them by the truckload." So therefore we sort of ventured out and started leasing conventional land, and now come down to Devonport and bought quite a bit of land. But in the early days we did grow every cool climate vegetable we could: collies, broccolis, carrots, beetroot. But we found with the labour that we had available to us down in the far northeast, we couldn't do a good job of everything. So we stuck to doing a good job of potatoes and eventually onions.
Nice one, thanks, Terence. And James, your role with Sumich as General Manager, you've been at that for a few years. What can you tell us a little bit about Sumich?
Sumich were WA based, and they purchased the Webster business in Tasmania. I think it was about 8 years ago. They were largely focused on carrots out of WA. They came to Tasmania to expand their geographical spread, diversity into carrots, and by default purchased an onion business as well. And then they've utilised that same network to sort of complement each other in a number of ways, to use export sort of customers that they had and domestic customers already had, to expand the onion operation and to diversify it a little bit. The Webster's was very export focused, but Sumich both do domestic and export, but very focused on the export side of things.
And in your role as GM, I guess you get a pretty good view of the whole sort of supply chain in Tasmania. What is it that makes growing here sort of attractive to Sumich from WA? How'd they land in Tasmania?
Well, Tasmania's got it's very sustainable climate, like very robust soils that are quite forgiving, and a temperate climate, so it's very good summer production. Sumich really came here for the summer carrot production side of things originally. Obviously moved into other areas now, but it's a very harsh climate in WA through the summertime, as you can imagine. Very good winter production area, but I suppose what Tasmania gives is a very sustainable, robust. We're really fortunate here to have such access to large amounts of sustainable water. A lot of water in other regions, it's there, but it's whether it's sustainable and of the quality that's here. And through the expansion of irrigation systems, that was obviously in its earnest at that time, but it's really utilised resource that was already in place and will be there for decades down the track. So yeah, it's really about that sort of robustness of system that Tasmania can offer and good rotation to supply sort of, particularly through the summer months, a great product for both export and domestic market. Also, sorry to jump back in there, Alex, but with the export onions into Europe, like Tasmania is probably the only area within Australia that has the climate and the natural sort of soil types to be able to do that sustainably. Obviously, South Australia into Southeast Asia, they do that quite a bit, but Tasmania's really got the qualities in their onions and the legs to send to Europe, whereas most other regions do not. So that's attractive within itself.
Nice one. Thanks, James. And I guess you've talked a lot about the pros of farming in Tasmania. It doesn't come without its challenges. What is the sort of biggest challenge for Sumich, or the big challenges for Sumich over the next 5 or 10 years, or looking beyond that if you would like to?
There's a multitude of challenges there.
Big ticket items.
It's really staying relevant to your customer base. And I suppose when I say that is it's having the regulatory requirements in place, like quality assurance. We all love to hate it, but we don't sell anything without that, basically, and it's having the right quarantine sort of systems to appease our customers internationally with what they require. I suppose it's having continuity of good quality product, and that's what Tasmania can really offer. Is if done well, it's supplying a good quality product year in, year out. Customers don't want fabulous one year and average the next, especially when it's travelled across the other side of the world, like they are more and more so. And with the cost of logistics where they are now, they want everything to turn up in a sound fashion, because they've budgeted on that to be a product that they're going to be able to utilise. So yeah, it's sustainability in that. And then when you're talking onions and carrots, they are very much a commodity product, and so they want those aspects, but it's got to be economically delivered, and that's probably where I see the challenge over the next decade, is that we've got a great system here to produce it, but our cost of production is extremely high. And we're still, at the end of the day, like, got customers that love the product, but they are selling that. It's not there's only a minority that will pay above a certain threshold for quality, etc. There's still a price sensitivity point, and with our cost of labour here and even just cost of machinery and parts, that's where the challenge will lay over the next decade, is being efficient and adopting technology to be efficient, but then having the economics to be able to adopt technology.
And before I head back to Terence, you guys are, as a business, you're always on the lookout for technologies and innovations to make your work sort of as efficient as it can be. Is there anything you could tell us about what your strategies are for addressing those challenges, whether they be regulatory or market access and that sort of thing?
Field technologies, or more like supply chain technologies?
You can answer one or both if you'd like.
Yeah, I suppose with field technologies, I'd say Sumich is reasonably conservative in adopting of new technology. I suppose over the journey that there's been a lot of false starts in some of those areas, but optics, robotics, I suppose like laser weeders are really sort of things that come to mind at the moment that looking fairly closely at, even optimising the most out of GPS guidance, which has its pros and cons again in our sort of environment here, and so yeah, we are sort of studying it fairly closely at the moment, and have adopted new technology into the packing houses to assist with that cost of production. But yeah, it's an interesting space because it's a big spend, and then there's big upkeep costs. You got to make sure that you're headed in the right direction, that you're backing the right ponies, I suppose.
Thanks, James. Terence, same questions to you. What do you see as the big sort of challenge, big ticket items in terms of challenges facing Yum Tasmania over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
The biggest challenge as a business is keeping a handle on productivity and making sure that every dollar we spend on wages is you're getting a dollar's worth of work for it. The Rudd government, in its wisdom, pulled out the piece rate, or dismantled the piece rate out of the horticulture award, which has been devastating to the industry. You can still have a piece rate, but the problem is that you have to guarantee every worker on the field every day that they're going to be making a minimum wage. And a lot of people don't care if they make a minimum wage or not, and that's certainly evident with some semi-retirees, but more so with the itinerant workers that come here on a working holiday visa. All they want to do is get their 88 days up so they can get a second-year visa. If they and they're happy to plod along and play around on their phone for half the day and pick a few, whatever they've got to pick for the other half the day. But now you've got to be really ruthless and give those people the flick, which is not good for them. It's not good for your manager's morale and everything else. But that's a hard call. Once a government does something like that, it's really hard for a future government to change it back. But it's really what needs to happen, because we've seen in every area where there's picking type activities happening, it's had a massive toll, because everyone that comes onto the farm that's not a full-time worker there, they think, well, we don't have to work very hard because we're going to get the minimum wage, so they don't.
And I mean, that speaks to regulatory and political sort of changes. Is there any sort of environmental challenges that you see facing Yum Tasmania in the next little while?
We've certainly found one this year that sort of really highlights the revolving cycle of our climates. I'm certainly not a climate change skeptic, but a lot of what is reported as extreme weather events, it's just taken its turn in coming around to us. This year, the last few years, we've had quite good success planting very early potato crops on virtually frost-free ground here close to the coast. This year we planted on Anzac Day, and we had a crop at the Don that got 3 frosts on it, and I hadn't seen a frost since we moved to Devonport in 2012. And I remember when I was a kid down in the northeast of Tassie, it often didn't rain from the end of August right through until the autumn break after Easter. And it was great when you was a kid playing cricket, because you didn't have a strength to hit the ball very far, and you'd get any sort of a leg glance, and all of a sudden the ball would race away over this bleached outfield for 4. But I remember my father at the time, he'd tell us kids, 30 years ago it used to rain in the summer and the grass would be growing up over the fence. We'd cut 3 cuts of hay, and we always thought he was just bullshitting. But in about 1993 or 4, it actually changed back to that weather pattern, and they've had terrific winter rains down in the northeast. So the grass does grow up over the fence, and it's there again now.
And do you use technology or anything like that to monitor how the season's playing out? How do you keep an eye on that?
No technology. I mean, you can look at the best available climate forecasts, and they still get it very, very wrong.
I think they admit to that. Yep.
But yeah, I think we're into a cycle that was really here although it keeps raining every now and again, which throws that theory out. But I think we're getting back to that 1970s weather pattern by and large again, and I sort of hope we do, because everywhere's fairly well set up to irrigate now in the intensive horticulture areas of Tasmania, and we really want sunshine. We don't want rain.
I mean, I think it'd be remiss of me to say that the evidence suggests that climate change is a factor, and it's something we have to deal with. But everyone deals with the environment in which their farm exists, and it sounds like you're doing a pretty good job of that, Terence. Do you have what sort of strategies do you put in to make sure that your labour turns up every day and picks their fair share, and make sure that you can keep farming the way you do?
Well, we need to be more automated, and as an industry, we need to adopt as soon as something's proven. We need to be adopting it, and it won't be long, and there'll be autonomous tractors running up and down the coast here very soon, I'm sure.
Sorry, Terence, I've sort of let us go on a little bit, so I do have one more question to ask you both, and that is, what would you like to see TIA researching in the future to continue supporting you guys farming the way you want to farm? What sort of research? And I'll get you to think about that as well, James.
It's probably a simplistic view of it, but we really need silver bullets, and I think fungus pressures going to become more and more of an issue, more so than insects and certainly fertiliser, which is quite easy. But silver bullets for fungicide, the silver bullet fungicides are what's going to be what's needed and what's going to save the industry, I think.
Thanks, Terence. James, what's your sort of wish list for TIA research?
Alex, this one probably is a bit of a bone of contention with myself at the moment. Not so much with TIA, but I was just talking to our Gracie before outside, and I suppose over the last 2 years, I feel we're getting, it's been occurring for some period of time, but it's becoming evident that it's getting more challenging to have applied research done, and I don't think that sort of sits with TIA. I think it's more around funding bodies. Like, I've been involved in a couple of research projects, and you see the hoops that you have to jump over to hit milestone reports, and even the way that you have to pitch reports to or subjects to sort of gain the funding, and so I think TIA is obviously working within that sort of national sort of framework, but there's a lot of decades ago there was some great applied research done, and there still is, like what Peter obviously was presenting and what's been presented today, and what the Innovation Hub's trying to do, but I think it is around, rather than an individual subject, it's around researching a whole system, like how that integrates in to a working model. And so when we sort of talk about extreme weather events, it's not just finding, Nathan mentioned drainage before, that's certainly a critical component. And I think what he was sort of leading towards is that look at the whole system, like how rather than just what that one piece of research does there, how do you then manipulate that in and sort of influence what people are doing day to day in their operations, and making it more robust with this type of variabilities in weather events that we're seeing.
Thanks, James, and thanks, Terence. It sounds like fungicides and applied research into sort of integrated farm systems. Nigel, are we done, or have we got time for a couple of questions? Yeah, cool. Anyone got any questions for Terence or James?
Crowd's hungry.
Yeah, I reckon that's right. Well, look, I'd like to say thanks again, Terence and James. I've been hustling you a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and I really appreciate you turning up to do something that I guess wouldn't necessarily be part of your day job. So, cheers. If everyone could give me a clap.
Thanks to Alex as well for leading that discussion, and please, make yourself available to the industry presentations in the veg shed. We're going to have lunch now in the shed opposite the veg shed, and make your way into the veg shed as well. So thanks to Doug and the team at the at Forthside here for hosting us. It's a really fabulous way that they can show their contribution to industry and what they're doing here on farm. We will have lunch now for about 45 minutes, and for those of you hanging on for the farm walks, and I do encourage you to hang on for that, we're going to be hearing some really interesting work that's happening on farm. So Jason Scott is going to take us through the weed poppies. Nathan will be taking us through hydroponic strawberries. Dugald will be taking us through the Chinese Medicinal Research Hub work. There'll be a demonstration by Simon Edwards on the quoll, so the enos, to sniff soils. And then Pramila, PhD student, part of the Cool Climate program, will be talking about her work on the potato physiological ageing. So please hang around for that, and I think you'll be really fascinated by the on-ground work that's happening at the farm. But I do want to thank you all for rocking up this morning. What have I missing? All right, and there will be a survey as well, and you can scan the QR code for that. Thank you so much for turning up this morning. It's really great to see so many faces, so many familiar faces and new faces as well. It's a fabulous industry, and it's really great to be able to celebrate that this morning. So enjoy lunch and enjoy great chats as well. Thank you again.